The Arsenal FC team that George Graham managed in the 1980s and 90s was renowned for its defensive stability, with the likes of Tony Adams, Steve Bold, Martin Keown and Lee Dixon at its heart. Another important member of this team was Paul Davis. We asked the Gunners legend to reveal the secrets of Arsenal's offside trap and why it was so effective.
Talk about the offside that we used to play, and we were renowned for it. Really, a lot of teams came up against this offside trap, and it was difficult for them to play against. I mean, I don't think too many teams played it in the way that we played it, and we did it really, really well. I felt we caught a lot of teams offside. Nowadays, there's not so much offsides in the game, and teams don't actually play that way. You know, we went out specifically to get teams offside. So again, if, as I mentioned before, teams often played with two up front against us. And what we used to do, and I mentioned it earlier on, was that our two fullbacks, Lee Dixon or Nigel Winterburn, would just be a little bit ahead of our two centre-backs, maybe just a couple of yards ahead. So if players from the opposition try to make runs, even from midfield, we would go with them. The midfielders would go with them, so myself would go with that player. But there came a point where we'd say, oh, they're not going to go any further, and we would actually stop. And these two centre-halves would make the call. These will be the ones that say, you know, put their hand up more often than not and say we're going to stop it and get these guys offside. So it was never the fullbacks playing offsides. They were a little bit ahead. It was always these guys, the two centre-backs playing the offside situation. So if these guys made runs in there, silly runs, he'd just go with them, then stop, put his hand up, and then he could be offside. And the same would be this side. If this forward decided to make a run in there, Steve Bold would go with him for a little way, stop, he'd keep on running. And Steve Bold did that full well knowing that the only other person behind him probably would be his other centre-back. He knew that Nigel wouldn't be there because that's what we trained ourselves to do. So he knew he could do that with full confidence, knowing that there would be no one behind him. Because often, if Steve was facing that way, or if you are facing that way as a player, often you don't know what's going on around behind you. But because we trained it and we worked it in training, Steve, even though he's faced that way, he knew that his other centre-back wouldn't be there keeping him on. Steve knew that his other centre-back would actually be in line with him, and Steve also knew that his full-back would be ahead of him, so he could actually let this forward run full well knowing that he would be offside, there would be no one else behind him. And everybody else knew it'd be the same on the other side of the pitch. If it was Dave O'Leary, for instance, Dave knew that if he ran with him and then stopped and he was offside, there was nobody behind Dave keeping him on. So generally that's how our offside worked. It was a lot about working in training, communicating in training, and it's mainly just the back four that worked that. Nobody else would be involved in that.